Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that distills research, articles, and insights, really getting to the core of things for you. Today we're tackling a moment that, well, it truly cleaved history in two, a before and an after. We're talking about the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. Our mission today is to guide you through what's arguably one of the most complex and, frankly, pivotal periods in human history. We'll start with the science. These incredible breakthroughs in physics, how they went from theory to world-altering reality so fast. Then we'll really dive into the sheer effort to build the bomb. This secret project, the Manhattan Project, it was just monumental, mobilized the entire nation, practically. And crucially, we have to confront the immediate effects. Devastating doesn't even begin to cover it. Then we'll step back, look at the long-term fallout, human, geopolitical. It changed everything. You'll get a really clear picture of the immediate and the long-term consequences, the scientific path that led there, and the specific horrifying effects of those bombs. And, there are some genuinely surprising elements here.
Like how the research started internationally, the unbelievable scale of the secrecy, and even some unexpected outcomes for Japan itself. Okay, let's start right at the beginning. The scientific genesis. Unlocking the atom's power, the real turning point, you can say the spark, was January 1939. Think about that timing, just 8 months before World War II kicks off. Europe's on a knife edge. And here's the thing that grabs you immediately. This huge breakthrough. It wasn't American, it wasn't British.
No, it was German. Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann. They were the ones who definitively showed that if you hit uranium atoms with neutrons, well, you didn't just chip a bit off. They found radioisotopes of elements like barium, lanthanum stuff from the middle of the periodic table.
Which meant the atom was actually splitting, right? Not just losing a small piece.
Exactly, splitting into lighter elements. It was revolutionary. And it built on some really insightful, though maybe puzzling at the time, work done in France the year before in 1938. Irene Joliot-Curie and Paul Elisavich had seen similar things. So the clues were there. The atom wasn't indivisible after all. It could be cracked open.
What's fascinating, though, is how this discovery, this earth-shattering news, got out.
Right. It spread incredibly fast, almost defying the political storm clouds gathering. You had Lise Meitner and Otto Frisch, two brilliant Jewish scientists who'd already fled Nazi Germany. They immediately grasped the huge implications of Hahn and Strassmann's results. They talked to Niels Bohr in Copenhagen. Bohr was, a giant in physics.
And Bohr was heading to the U.S. anyway, wasn't he?
He was. Talk about timing. He arrived in New York, January 16th, 1939, and he immediately started discussing it with the physicists already there. Einstein, John Archibald Wheeler, others. The news it ripped through the scientific community, across borders, across disciplines. It was incredibly rapid.
And then it became public.
Just 10 days after Bohr landed, January 26, 1939, the discovery was announced. And Meitner and Frisch had given it a name, fission, the splitting of the nucleus.
Okay, so the atom splits. What next? I mean, what's the implication?
Well, that's where Enrico Fermi comes in, another brilliant mind. He put a revolutionary idea to Bohr. What if, he asked, when the atom splits, what if neutrons themselves are released in the process?
So one split could trigger another.
Precisely. That's the mind-bending possibility of a sustained nuclear chain reaction. One atom splits, releases neutrons, then those neutrons hit more atoms, which split, releasing more neutrons.
An accelerating cascade. Wow.
That was the theoretical leap that really lit the fuse, moving from just an interesting scientific finding to something that could, change the world. The source material calls it a flurry of activity in physics, and you can just feel that energy, can't you?
Absolutely. And then they figured out it wasn't just any uranium.
Right. Bohr and Wheeler did further studies. They realized this powerful fission happens mainly in uranium-235, which is actually quite rare, not in the much more common, stable uranium-238. U-235 was the key, the unstable twin, if you like.
So just to get this straight, within about 18 months of the initial discovery.
Yeah, by June 1940, the basics were out there. The basic facts concerning the release of atomic energy were known throughout the scientific world.
It wasn't a secret?
No, not the fundamental science. It was discovered rapidly, disseminated widely. It just shows how quickly science could move, even then, even on the brink of war. And that speed, that almost borderless sharing of knowledge, it set the stage for everything that followed. It turned abstract theory into a terrifying potential reality.
And that potential reality felt incredibly urgent, didn't it? Especially with the world plunging into war.
Exactly. The U.S. was already fighting on two massive fronts, Europe and the Pacific. And yet they launched this unprecedented scientific effort, the Manhattan Project.
The scale just boggles the mind. 37 different installations, university labs, 100,000 people.
It was like building a secret industrial nation overnight. And the brain power involved, I mean, Nobel laureates, Arthur Compton, Fermi again, Richard Feynman, Ernest Lawrence, Harold Urey. Just a staggering collection of minds focused on one goal.
How did the government actually get involved initially? Was it immediate?
It started pretty early, actually. March 1939, George Pegram at Columbia University set up a meeting for Fermi with some U.S. Navy officers, just exploring the implications.
But Einstein played a key role.
A crucial role. Leo Szilard and Eugene Wigner, two other brilliant physicists who'd fled Europe, they went to see Einstein. They convinced him to write a letter. An economist named Alexander Sachs then took that letter directly to President Roosevelt.
And what did the letter say?
Essentially, it laid out the significance of fission, the potential for an incredibly powerful bomb, and crucially warned that Nazi Germany might already be working on it.
Ah, the Hitler factor.
Absolutely. U.S. officials knew Hitler had atomic ambitions. Einstein's letter specifically mentioned that Germany had taken control of uranium mines in Czechoslovakia. That added real urgency.
Were other allies involved early on?
Yes, the British were doing their own research too. Urey and Pegram actually visited the UK at Liège, and by August 1943, it became a more formal combined effort, a policy committee with the UK and Canada. That led to many British and Canadian scientists moving to the US to join the project, a real pooling of resources against the Nazi threat.
So the organization must have been intense. How did they structure such a massive secret project?
It ramped up quickly. December 6, 1941, literally the day before Pearl Harbor, it was put under Vannevar Bush and the Office of Scientific Research and Development, the OSRD.
Bush, he was a key figure.
Huge. He brought in top advisors, James Conant, the president of Harvard, Pegram, Urey, Lawrence, the best scientific minds.
But it wasn't just scientists calling the shots.
Oh no, there was a top policy group, high-level political and military oversight. You had Bush, Conant, FDR himself, Vice President Wallace, Secretary of War Stimson, Army Chief of Staff George Marshall, the very top.
That shows how vital they thought it was.
Undeniably. Then the actual construction, the massive building effort, was handed over to the Army Corps of Engineers Manhattan District in June 42.
And that's where the name comes from.
That's the origin. And then in September 42, Brigadier General Leslie R. Groves took charge of all Army activities for the project. He was known for handling huge construction jobs, like the Pentagon.
So Groves was the get-it-done guy.
He was. And under him, it officially became the Manhattan Project. It's amazing how this structure emerged, basically creating a secret scientific military-industrial complex from scratch. It really set a template for big science funded by the state.
What were the biggest scientific hurdles they faced? It wasn't just theory anymore.
No, it was hardcore engineering and physics. And because they weren't sure which method would work best or fastest, they pursued several paths at once, a kind of parallel development strategy.
Okay, so what were these parallel paths?
Two main goals, really. First, they had to truly understand the chain reaction, how to control it, how to trigger it reliably for a bomb. That was crucial for design. Second, they needed the fissile material itself. That meant figuring out how to produce plutonium.
Plutonium, a new element.
Entirely new, man-made. They theorized it would also be fissile, like U-235, but potentially easier to get. Why? Because you could create it in a reactor and then separate it out chemically from the uranium it was bred from.
Ah, so chemical separation versus isotopic separation. That sounds maybe simpler.
Potentially. Separating U-235 from the much more common U-238 is incredibly difficult because they're chemically identical, just slightly different weights. You need these massive, complex physical processes.
Like the ones Lawrence and Urey were working on.
Exactly. Ernest Lawrence's team at Berkeley used electromagnetic separation, basically giant magnets called calutrons, to bend beams of uranium ions. The lighter U-235 bends just a tiny bit more.
Complex.
Immensely. And Harold Urey's group at Columbia worked on gaseous diffusion. You convert uranium into a gas, uranium hexafluoride, and pump it through thousands of stages of porous barriers. The lighter U-235 gas molecules diffuse through just slightly faster.
Thousands of stages.
Thousands. Both methods needed large, complex facilities and huge amounts of electric power, as the source says. Just to get tiny amounts of U-235, they realized they'd need an enormous physical infrastructure. It was becoming an industrial challenge as much as a scientific one.
So they had to build this whole infrastructure in secret. Where did they even start?
Well, the first big breakthrough on the reactor side, proving the chain reaction was controllable, happened in Chicago.
Chicago, not some remote desert.
Nope. They'd moved the early reactor work from Columbia University to the University of Chicago under Arthur Compton's metallurgical laboratory. A nice, innocuous name, right?
Yeah. It's very low-key.
And on December 2nd, 1942, Enrico Fermi achieved the first self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction. In Chicago Pile Number 1, or CP1.
And where exactly in Chicago?
This is the amazing part. In a squash court under the bleachers of Stagg Field, the university's football stadium.
You're kidding. Under the stands.
Seriously, the dawn of the nuclear age happened beneath a football field. It proved controlled atomic energy was feasible, both for power and, crucially, for making that new element, plutonium.
Okay, so Chicago proved it could work. Then came the scaling up.
Massively. They needed industrial-scale facilities. Construction started in February 1943 on what became Oak Ridge, Tennessee, the Clinton Engineer Works, a huge 70-square-mile site for pilot uranium enrichment. Employed about 5,000 people eventually.
But Groves had concerns about Oak Ridge.
Yeah, its proximity to Knoxville. For the really big production reactors needed to make plutonium, he wanted more isolation. What if something went wrong?
So he looked elsewhere.
He found Hanford in south-central Washington state, a massive 580-square-mile site chosen in January 43. Perfect isolation. Access to the Columbia River for cooling water reactors generate immense heat and plenty of hydropower from Grand Coulee and Bonneville dams.
But building Hanford wasn't just about pouring concrete, was it? There was a human cost.
A significant one. The government essentially evicted the residents of 3 towns, Hanford, Richland, White Bluffs, gave them just 90 days to leave homes their families might have lived in for generations.
90 days.
And the Wanapum people, Native Americans who had lived and fished along that stretch of the Columbia River for centuries, were forced to relocate, losing their traditional fishing grounds. It's a part of the story that often gets overlooked. At its peak, Hanford employed over 50,000 workers. It was a city built in secret for a secret purpose.
And then there was Los Alamos. Even more secret.
The most secret of all. This was where the bomb itself would be designed and built. J. Robert Oppenheimer, the scientific director, chose Los Alamos, New Mexico, an isolated mesa 34 miles north of Santa Fe. Maximum security, maximum safety.
What was their specific mission there?
Starting in April 1943, the scientists and engineers arriving there had to figure out how to take the enriched uranium from Oak Ridge and the plutonium from Hanford, refine them into pure metal, and then design a workable weapon.
A weapon that could actually be dropped from a plane.
Exactly. It had to be small enough, robust enough for aerial delivery, and relatively simple to detonate reliably midair. And here's the kicker. They had to solve most of these problems before they even had enough U-235 or plutonium to work with.
Working blind almost.
In many ways, yes. It was an incredible theoretical and engineering challenge. By 1945, over 5,000 people, scientists, engineers, technicians, families, were living on the Hill, as they called it, completely cut off, their existence classified.
It really drives home that this wasn't just science. It was this immense feat of engineering, logistics, secrecy, with huge social impacts even before the bombs existed.
Absolutely. And by mid-1945, the context shifted dramatically.
Right. The war in Europe was over. Germany surrendered in May 45.
But the fighting in the Pacific was horrific. Iwo Jima, Okinawa. The projected casualties for an invasion of Japan were staggering.
So there was huge pressure to finish the bomb.
Immense pressure. And finally, by summer 1945, Oak Ridge and Hanford had produced enough fissile material. Los Alamos had the designs ready. It was time for a test. A full-scale field test.
A test that needed, as the source says, a vast array of complex equipment just to measure it.
Precisely. They needed to know if it worked and how well it worked.
So they had 2 main bomb designs ready by then.
That's right. 2 distinct approaches they planned to deploy. First was Little Boy. That used uranium-235.
The gun assembly design.
Yes, the simpler one. Basically firing one piece of U-235 into another to reach critical mass. The engineers felt pretty confident this would work without needing a test, but they wouldn't have enough U-235 ready until about August 1st.
And the second design.
Fat Man. This one used plutonium-239, which Hanford could supply enough of for a test by early July.
But the gun design didn't work for plutonium.
No. Plutonium is more volatile, more prone to pre-detonation. A simple gun assembly wouldn't slam the pieces together fast enough or evenly enough. It would likely just fizzle.
So they needed something more complex.
The implosion design, much trickier. Using conventional explosives arranged perfectly around a plutonium core to crush it inwards, symmetrically, under enormous pressure.
Compressing it into a critical mass.
Exactly. They thought this was the most efficient way to weaponize the relatively small amount of plutonium they had. But it was complex. Would it work? Would the implosion be perfectly symmetrical?
They weren't sure.
They needed proof. So the Trinity test was specifically designed to test this plutonium implosion device. It was a bigger question mark.
Okay, so the stage is set for Trinity, the moment of truth. Where and when did this happen?
Oppenheimer chose a spot down on the Alamogordo bombing range in New Mexico, now White Sands Missile Range, about 120 miles south of Albuquerque, very remote.
And he called it Trinity.
Yeah, apparently a reference to a John Donne poem. The device itself, the first bomb, was nicknamed Gadget.
Gadget. Seems understated.
Isn't it? They hoisted it up a 100-foot steel tower at a point they designated zero. The ground beneath became ground zero, a term that's now tragically part of our everyday language.
Who witnessed it?
Military brass, scientists, they were in observation posts miles away, 10,000 to 17,000 yards, told to lie down, feet towards the blast, shield their eyes.
What were the conditions like that morning?
Dramatic. July 16th, 1945. It was still dark, raining, even some lightning.
I'm bad.
5.29.45 a.m. detonation.
What was it like?
Blinding flash first, lit up mountains 10 miles off, turned night into day for an instant. Then this tremendous sustained roar and a shockwave, a burst of wind like a tornado.
What happened to the tower?
Vaporized,
Yeah.
gone. In its place, a crater, huge, half a mile across, 25 feet deep.
And the ground itself.
Fused. The heat melted the desert sand into a new kind of glassy greenish rock. They later called it trinitite.
A souvenir from the dawn of the atomic age. How powerful was it?
Equivalent to about 21,000 tons of TNT. 21 kilotons.
The blast effects must have carried a long way.
Oh, yeah. Visible from 50 miles. Broke windows 125 miles away. People over 180 miles off in Gallup, New Mexico, felt the ground shake.
Did the Army admit what happened?
Not really. They put out a cover story. Said an ammunition magazine with explosives and pyrotechnics blew up. No mention of an atomic bomb. But the secret was out, at least among those who needed to know.
And the news reached Truman quickly.
Yes, while he was at the Potsdam Conference with Churchill and Stalin. It strengthened his hand considerably.
Did he tell Stalin?
He did, apparently quite casually. Mentioned the U.S. had a new weapon of unusual destructive force. Didn't explicitly say atomic bomb, but Stalin likely knew, or suspected, Soviet espionage was pretty effective.
And then came the ultimatum to Japan.
July 26th. Surrender unconditionally or face prompt and utter destruction.
Was there any thought of just demonstrating the bomb, not using it on a city?
It was discussed, exploding one on an uninhabited island maybe, but they decided against it. Concerns it might not be enough to force surrender. What if it was seen as a bluff? And they only had a couple of bombs ready. They couldn't risk wasting one on a demo if it didn't work strategically.
So the decision was made to use it.
The preparations were already well underway. Modified B-29s, the massive airbase on Tinian in the Marianas readied. Trinity wasn't just a test, it was the green light. It changed the whole geopolitical equation instantly.
Let's talk about getting Little Boy, the uranium bomb, to Tinian. How did that happen?
It was fast. Just hours after Trinity succeeded on July 16th, the USS Indianapolis cruiser left San Francisco.
Carrying the bomb?
Carrying the crucial parts, the gun assembly, about half the U.S. supply of U-235 plus technicians. The rest of the uranium was flown out.
When did it arise?
Indianapolis got to Tinian on July 26th. Assembly of Little Boy started right away.
But the Indianapolis itself? There's a tragic story there.
Horrific.
Okay.
After delivering its cargo, it sailed for the Philippines and was torpedoed by a Japanese sub, I-58, on July 30th. Sank quickly. Hundreds of sailors who survived the sinking died in the water over several days waiting for rescue. Shark attacks, dehydration, just awful.
Unbelievable tragedy. And the second bomb, Fat Man.
The plutonium bomb components were flown to Tinian. So by August 2nd, 1945, both bombs were there, ready, just waiting for good weather for what they called Special Bombing Mission 13.
How did they choose the targets? Kokura, Hiroshima, Niigata, Kyoto initially.
General Groves headed the target committee. They specifically wanted cities that hadn't been heavily damaged by conventional bombing yet.
Why?
To clearly show the bomb's unique power. No confusion with prior damage. Kyoto was top of the list initially, ancient capital, major city.
But it was spared.
Yes. Secretary of War Stimson argued strongly to Truman against bombing Kyoto because of its immense cultural and historical significance. He felt it would permanently damage future relations. So Truman agreed. Nagasaki was put on the list instead.
And Hiroshima became the primary target.
Chosen for its military importance, 2nd Army HQ, communications hub, but also, chillingly, because its layout, relatively compact and flat, was thought ideal to most vividly demonstrate the destructive power. a calculated choice for maximum psychological impact.
Let's talk about the mission itself, the Enola Gay.
Right. The plane and crew were from the 509th Composite Group, especially trained for this. Colonel Paul Tibbets commanded the group and piloted the B-29 for the Hiroshima mission.
Who else was key on the crew?
Major Thomas Ferriby was the bombardier, the one who'd actually aim and release the bomb, and Captain Deke Parsons, a Navy captain but also a key ordnance expert from the Manhattan Project, was the weaponeer.
And the plane's name?
Tibbets named it Enola Gay after his mother. Had it painted on the nose right before takeoff around 2:45 a.m. August 6th.
Were there other planes?
Yes, 2 other B-29s flew alongside for observation and filming, documenting history.
And Parsons armed the bomb in flight. That seems risky.
It was a safety measure. There had been B-29 crashes on takeoff from Tinian's busy airfield. They were terrified a crash could detonate a fully armed bomb, wiping out the base. So Parsons did the final sensitive arming steps after they were safely airborne. Shows the extreme precautions they took.
So, August 6th, 1945. Hiroshima. Describe the approach.
Clear skies. No Japanese fighters, no flak. They flew high, around 31,000 feet.
Did they confirm the target?
Yes. Weather planes ahead reported good visibility over Hiroshima. Around 7:15 a.m. Tinian time, Parsons finished arming the weapon.
And the bomb run.
Around 8:00 a.m. local time in Hiroshima, they sighted the city. Tibbets gave control to Ferriby, the bombardier, around 8:12 a.m. Ferry aimed for the Ioi Bridge, a distinctive T-shaped bridge, easy to spot.
Release time.
8:15 a.m. local time, bomb away. Tibbets immediately banked the Enola Gay, hard to get clear.
How long did it take to fall?
About 45 seconds. It was set to detonate at 1,900 feet altitude for maximum airburst effect. Exploded directly over Shema Hospital.
And the immediate effect on the ground.
Instantaneous, unimaginable heat. Over 7,000 degrees Celsius, 12,600 Fahrenheit at ground zero. Hotter than the sun's surface. Then the flash and the blast wave that just scoured the landscape, vaporized everything close by.
It's hard to comprehend. What did that mean for the people, the city itself?
Absolute catastrophe. Population was around 343,000. Estimates are 70,000 killed instantly, just gone.
Instantly.
And the death toll climbed rapidly. By the end of 1945, it was over 100,000 dead from the blast, burns, injuries, radiation sickness starting to kick in.
The destruction.
2/3 of the city flattened, destroyed. People caught in the open near the hypocenter were simply vaporized, leaving only eerie nuclear shadows burned onto the pavement or walls.
And the mushroom cloud.
Rose over 40,000 feet, over 12 kilometers high, became the terrifying symbol of this new power.
And this was from less than 2% of the uranium actually fissioning.
That's chilling part. Inefficient by later standards, but still yielded 15 kilotons, 15,000 tons of TNT equivalent. Utterly horrifying power.
What did the crew see?
Sergeant Bob Caron, the tail gunner, was the only one who directly watched the explosion. He described it later as a peep into hell.
Did they feel it on the plane?
Oh, yes. Multiple shock waves hit the Enola Gay as they flew away. Even hundreds of miles out, the cloud was still visible. They returned to Tinian after 12 hours. Tibbets was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. Mission accomplished.
How was it announced to the world? Truman's address?
Later that day, Truman spoke. Announced one bomb on Hiroshima, called it an important Japanese army base, said it had more power than 20,000 tons of TNT, over 2,000 times the largest conventional bomb used before.
He framed it as revenge for Pearl Harbor.
Explicitly. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid manyfold, and the end is not yet. He called it a new and revolutionary increase in destruction.
Did he call it an atomic bomb?
Yes. An atomic bomb, said it was, a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws its power has been loosed. He also highlighted the cost and gamble. We have spent $2 billion on the greatest scientific gamble in history and won.
A very triumphalist tone. Was there any immediate counter-narrative, any questioning?
There was. James A.G., writing in Time magazine, captured a sense of deep unease, even amidst the victory. He acknowledged the race was won, the weapon used by the right side, but he wrote that using it against living creatures instead of dead matter created a bottomless wound in the living conscience of the race.
A bottomless wound. Powerful words.
He saw it as this Promethean conquest over nature, putting the power of the sun in human hands, but questioned the wisdom of it. It raises that huge moral question you hinted at. How much were leaders truly grappling with this versus the sheer momentum of war?
And what was the reaction in Japan? Did they understand what had hit them?
Slowly. It was hard to grasp. Some officials apparently tried to downplay it, suggesting maybe it was a one-off, given their own struggles with atomic research. Maybe the Americans only had one.
Wishful thinking.
Or desperation. Others in the government had already been pushing for a negotiated peace, maybe through the Soviets, hoping to preserve the emperor, some semblance of the old order.
But that option disappeared quickly.
Vanished. August 8th, 2 days after Hiroshima, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Manchuria. Suddenly, Japan faced not just this terrifying new weapon, but a fresh, massive enemy on the Asian mainland. The window for Soviet mediation slammed shut.
So despite Hiroshima, despite the Soviet declaration, still no surrender.
Not yet. By the morning of August 9th, Soviet troops were advancing in Manchuria and Sakhalin Island, but Tokyo was silent on the Potsdam Ultimatum.
So the second mission went ahead.
It did. The B-29 Boxcar, piloted by Major Charles Sweeney, took off from Tinian around 3:47 a.m.
Carrying Fat Man.
The plutonium implosion bomb, like the Trinity device. Captain Kermit Behan was bombardier, Commander Frederick Ashworth the weaponeer.
Was this one armed in flight too?
No, Fat Man was loaded, fully assembled. They were more confident in its stability. Ashworth armed it shortly after takeoff. Weather planes went ahead again. Primary target, Kokura. Initial reports looked okay.
But things went wrong over Kokura.
Badly wrong. They arrived around 9:45 a.m. local time, but the city was obscured. Thick clouds, haze, possibly smoke from a nearby firebombing raid the night before in Yahata.
So they couldn't see the target.
Couldn't get a clear visual on the arsenal, which was the endpoint. They made 3 passes, circling for about 45 minutes.
Burning fuel, attracting attention.
Exactly. Fuel was getting low. Risk of anti-aircraft fire was increasing. Ashworth made the call. Abort Kokura. Proceed to the secondary target. Sweeney turned south towards Nagasaki.
Was Nagasaki a better target physically?
Actually, no. Geographically, it was much less ideal than Hiroshima. Hiroshima was flat, open. Nagasaki is hilly, the city built up in 2 main valleys along the coast.
So the hills would affect the blast.
Definitely. The endpoint was a Mitsubishi arms plant, located between the 2 populated valleys. But the uneven terrain was expected to block and deflect the blast wave, reducing its destructive reach compared to Hiroshima, even though Fat Man was more powerful.
The geographical shield in a way.
In some parts, yes. It meant the destruction wouldn't be as uniformly widespread.
So Boxcar arrives over Nagasaki.
Shortly before 11:00 a.m. local time. And it's clouded over, too. Even thicker clouds than Kokura.
They must have been incredibly frustrated. And low on fuel.
Critically low. Sweeney told the crew, 1 pass only. This is it.
Did they see the target?
No. But just as they were about to abandon the run, a gap appeared in the clouds. Not over the intended endpoint, but further up the Urakami Valley. Behan seized the moment, released the bomb.
When did it detonate?
It fell to about 1,650 feet, then exploded at 11:02 a.m. over the Urakami Valley area northwest of the main city center.
And the yield?
21 kilotons. 21,000 tons of TNT. Even more powerful than Little Boy, the biggest explosion yet created by humans.
What was the immediate death toll in Nagasaki?
Estimated at 40,000 killed instantly. Similar horrific scale to Hiroshima.
Again, more died later.
Yes, at least another 30,000 by the end of the year from injuries and radiation. But precise numbers are impossible. So many records were destroyed.
How much of the city was destroyed?
About 40% of the buildings were destroyed or severely damaged. But, as predicted, the hills did provide some protection. Significant parts of Nagasaki, especially the older districts and government areas further southeast, were relatively undamaged by the blast itself. The destruction was intense, but more localized than Hiroshima.
What happened to Boxcar?
Jolted by the shock waves, just like Enola Gay. Observation planes got photos of the cloud, but they were far too low on fuel to make it back to Tinian.
Where did they land?
Sweeney managed to get them to Okinawa for an emergency landing. Made it, just barely.
So 2 bombs, 2 devastated cities. What finally prompted the surrender?
Well, Truman's decision remains controversial, debated endlessly, but the effect of Nagasaki seemed almost immediate on the Japanese leadership.
Emperor Hirohito intervened.
Yes. August 10th, the day after Nagasaki. He broke tradition, stepped into politics, and told his government to accept the Potsdam terms. Unprecedented.
Did they surrender immediately?
They sent an offer, agreeing to surrender if the emperor's position as sovereign ruler was guaranteed.
How did the Allies respond?
Rejected it. Secretary of State Burns replied clearly, the emperor's authority would be subject to the Supreme Allied Commander. No conditions.
Was there a threat of more bombs?
Implicitly, yes. General Groves informed Truman another bomb would be ready very soon, The pressure was immense.
Was there resistance within Japan to surrendering?
Oh, yes. Some hardline military leaders actually attempted a coup to prevent the surrender announcement. It failed, but it shows the internal division.
When did they finally accept?
August 14th, Japan accepted the Allied terms unconditionally.
And Hirohito spoke to the nation.
The next day, August 15th, a recorded message was broadcast. For most Japanese people, it was the first time they'd ever heard their emperor's voice. He announced the surrender.
And the formal end of the war.
September 2nd, 1945. The signing ceremony on the deck of the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. World War II was finally over.
Looking back at the effects, beyond the death tolls, what made these bombs different? Physicist Philip Morrison went to Hiroshima, didn't he?
He did. Part of the U.S. team assessing the damage.
Well,
his description is chilling. He called the bomb a weapon of saturation.
Saturation.
Meaning it destroys everything, everyone over a large area so quickly and completely that defense, escape, rescue, it's all hopeless.
He documented the infrastructure collapse.
Devastatingly. In Hiroshima, 26 of 33 fire stations destroyed, 3/4 of firefighters killed or injured. Only 30 doctors out of nearly 300 escaped injury. 1,800 nurses and orderlies out of 2,400 killed or badly hurt. All hospitals but one unusable. Power, rail, communications gone.
Total paralysis.
Complete breakdown of society's ability to respond. Morrison was so horrified by what he saw, he spent the rest of his life campaigning against nuclear weapons. The experience fundamentally changed him.
Was there an official U.S. report on the casualties and effects?
Yes, compiled by Manhattan Project personnel, released by the War Department in June 1946. It gave those initial estimates: 135,000 casualties in Hiroshima, over half the population, 64,000 in Nagasaki.
But those numbers were incomplete.
Acknowledged as estimates at best. And notably, they omitted large groups like the thousands of Korean forced laborers who were in both cities. The true human cost was almost certainly higher.
What did the report identify as the main causes of death?
3 main categories. First, burns, including flash burns from the thermal radiation. Huge percentage. 60% of deaths in Hiroshima, 80% in Nagasaki. These were horrific, deep burns.
The second.
Mechanical injuries, flying debris, collapsing buildings. The blast wave itself, like a conventional super explosion, caused 30% of deaths in Hiroshima, 14% in Nagasaki.
And the third, unique effect.
Radiation injuries, caused only by the intense gamma rays and neutrons released at the instant of detonation. This invisible killer accounted for 10% of deaths in Hiroshima, 6% in Nagasaki, leading to acute radiation sickness and later cancers.
Well, what about lingering radioactivity? Fallout.
This is important. The 1946 report stated clearly, no harmful amount of persistent radioactivity was found in either of the 2 cities in the months after the bombings. The main danger was the initial blast, heat, and prompt radiation. Ground contamination wasn't the primary long-term issue in the way people sometimes imagine Chernobyl, for example.
How bad was the structural damage?
Near total destruction at the core. In Hiroshima, almost everything within a mile of ground zero was obliterated, except some reinforced concrete structures. Even those were gutted shells. Over 60,000 buildings out of 90,000 destroyed or severely damaged.
And Nagasaki.
Even reinforced concrete buildings with thick walls collapsed if they were within about 2,000 feet of ground zero. Still immense power, though. Again, the hills limited the reach compared to Hiroshima.
You mentioned surprising geopolitical outcomes earlier. What about Japan's territory?
This is fascinating. It turns out, based on Soviet documents released after the Cold War, Stalin was ready to invade and occupy Hokkaido, Japan's northern island.
Invade Japan itself.
Yes. In the 2 weeks between Hirohito's surrender announcement and the formal signing, he'd already been promised the Kuril Islands at Yalta, but he saw a chance to grab Hokkaido too. Turn the Sea of Okhotsk into a Soviet lake.
Why didn't he?
Pressure from Truman. And the clear, though maybe unspoken, implied threat of the atomic bomb. The U.S. had just shown what it could do. Stalin backed down, called off the invasion just days before it was planned.
So the bomb, in a strange way, might have kept Japan whole.
It seems so. Hokkaido was spared the fate of North Korea, divided and drawn into the Cold War conflict zone. An unintended and arguably positive for Japan consequence of the bombings. A real geopolitical ripple effect.
What about the rebuilding of the cities?
Extensive reconstruction started during the U.S. occupation. Hiroshima enacted a comprehensive plan in 1950, rebuilt itself as an industrial center, helped by the fact the Mazda factory survived, fueling economic recovery.
And Nagasaki.
The destroyed Irakami Valley was rebuilt, but large parts of the historic city survived and became tourist draws. Both cities, though, powerfully embraced a new identity. They became spiritual centers of the movement to ban nuclear weapons. Hiroshima's Peace Memorial Park, the atomic bomb dome, the preserved ruin of the Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Powerful symbols.
And what are the survivors? The Hibakusha.
Their story is crucial to the long-term legacy. The Japanese government promised them free lifetime medical care.
Was their health studied systematically?
Yes. Starting in 1947, the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission, ABCC, later renamed the Radiation Effects Research Foundation, RERF, in 1975, began long-term research.
How extensive was this research?
Massive. Over 120,000 hibakusha enrolled in the lifespan study. It's still ongoing, tracking health effects across generations.
Why is that study so important?
The sheer size of the group and the decades-long follow-up make it an invaluable resource for understanding the long-term effects of radiation exposure on humans. Cancers, other illnesses, the subtle delayed damage. It's provided unique, though tragic, insights, a living legacy of the bombings.
It's been quite a journey today. From discovering fission, this abstract scientific idea,
To the colossal engineering feat of the Manhattan Project, built in secret.
to the unimaginable devastation unleashed on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
And finally, grappling with the immediate aftermath and the long, complex shadow these events cast.
It's clear these bombings didn't just end a war. They fundamentally changed our world warfare politics, our understanding of human capability for destruction. They ushered in the atomic age.
No question.
We've talked about how Truman said the force from which the sun draws its power was unleashed. And the initial destruction was blindingly fast, absolute. Cities wiped out. But think about this. The study of the hibakusha continues, decades later, still revealing the quieter, lingering wounds. The long-term health effects are a constant reminder, aren't they? A reminder of the immense, almost terrifying ethical responsibility that comes with unlocking such scientific power. So the question for you to consider is, where do we draw the line? What does this story tell us about the complex, often dangerous intersection of scientific progress and our shared human responsibility? Something to think about.